Okay, now we're looking at Origins, a rather large piece, 3 panels.
Yeah, Origins began as a project that was initiated by two well-known realist artists and the Evansville Museum in Indiana. And it's a fascinating project. It was called the Object Project. And basically, the two artists in the museum selected 15 well-known realist artists from around the country. And we were each given the same 5 objects. A hand mirror, a glass of water, or a glass actually, it's an empty glass, a ball of string, a moth that was mounted in a little box, and let's see, what was the 5th one? A bone. It was a leg bone of a coyote, and
Mhm.
and those objects were selected through a voting process that we all went through. And so one day, this little box arrived with those 5 objects in it, and we were each given about a year to come up with something based on those objects. So it was really interesting because each artist kind of came up with something completely different. And I was really interested in doing something that created a narrative around those objects. And so I worked on this. Oh boy, it took me a year just to come up with the concept. But it was inspired by something that happened here close to where we live in Dover, Pennsylvania. There was a whole issue that arose over teaching creationism in the schools as science. And it became a hotly contested court case that eventually went to the Supreme Court in the state and got some national media coverage. And so I've always been fascinated by this whole relationship between science and religion. And so this painting kind of deals with that. And in the left panel, you have the left panel represents science in a sense, with kind of a nature cabinet with drawers of natural objects, and you have this sort of man-made light shining down on the objects on the table. And in the glass of water, there's actually a little tadpole that's with the
Mhm.
legs starting to form, which kind of symbolizes the whole evolutionary process. And then in the right panel, you have this serpent or a snake, and it's battling with these, or going after these moths, which are sort of age-old symbols of the soul. And so there are a lot of religious references on that panel, and that kind of represents the whole side of religion. And then the center panel, the child is blindfolded, sort of like blind faith, and it's bashing this pinata, which is somewhat like well, it's in a dinosaur shape. So again, it could be symbolic of evolution, or so it represents that back and forth between religion and science. And even the sort of the shape of the kids in the foreground kind of suggests that ascent of
Uh-huh.
man. Yeah, with
I did not pick up on that. That's.
yeah. So, and the thing is, with a lot of my work, the average person may not get any of that at all, but
Mm.
there are clues to it, including on the piece itself. Is the title Origins, which suggests, just vaguely suggests what might be going on in the painting.
Mm.
And so, but I've heard other interpretations that I find equally as interesting. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be about what I have in mind. What I'm hoping is it just gets someone thinking and engaged with the work.
Mm.
Um, so it was a great show, and it traveled to 5 different museums around the country, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of it.
It's a great piece.
Thanks.